What's up, you guys? Sean Ross Sapp, Fightful.com. It is January 26th, and we got a special guest for a very special time in pro wrestling. We got Brandon Thurston. You might remember him as Brandon Howard Thurston. Why no three-name gimmick? It's worked for me.
Yeah, you've had so much success with it. I didn't want to steal your gimmick. But,
Yeah.
I wrestle as this name too, so I figured why not just make it easier for people.
Well, it's worked out either way for you. He heads up WrestleNomics.com, which is just the go-to for literally every type of thing that we're going to speak about today. I often delegate to your sort of input and advice and opinion on a lot of these things, because to say that WrestleNomics has been a proven success and formula that has influenced the wrestling industry would be a major understatement. So go check that out, guys. But I want to know what your initial thoughts were. Like, did you have like a phrase in your head when you heard WWE Network going to Peacock?
Well, it's something that's been talked about for about a year now, ever since George Barris and Michelle Wilson, who were at that time the co-presidents of WWE, they were fired on January 30th, 2020. And it was apparently because of strategic differences between them and Vince McMahon. He wanted to no longer go with this direct-to-consumer WWE Network, at least on the U.S. side, and we wanted to sell the rights to a major streaming player. And apparently he was talking to ESPN Plus. I think that's according to Dave Meltzer.
Yes.
Then COVID happened, and that interrupted everything and caused all sorts of economic havoc. So that didn't happen for a while. And then Nick Khan was brought in as the new chief revenue officer and president of WWE. He's the one who helped them make the TV deals that they got done in 2018, which are their current deals now that they're getting paid under, that they're getting paid enormous TV rights fees for Raw and SmackDown. And now he works for WWE. He almost certainly had everything to do with this deal with Peacock. And, there were, it was always a subject that came up on the earnings calls between January of last year and the most recent one in October. So I was not so much expecting it to happen this soon rather than later, because I was just confused about how the best way was to sell the pay-per-views at this point, because I think these are pay-per-views that used to be charged $60 for. And now we spent the last 7 years teaching everybody that they're worth $10.
And UFC has since raised theirs up to like 70, 75.
Have they? Yeah. And sometimes they crash.
Yes.
Which I've heard about. Yeah. But it's a product that used to be super expensive, and they cut the price into 1/6 basically. And I have felt that, I think the best way to monetize these events is to sell them for a large fee, like $50 or $60. Is probably not what people want to hear, but I think that's the best way to monetize them. And I don't know if you can put the genie back in the bottle, but I guess what I hadn't considered, which I'm starting to understand now, is that when you're a big cable company like Comcast, which is who owns NBC Universal, you're probably looking at your cable subscribers decline over time. No telling when that's ever going to end. They're presumably just going to decline indefinitely. I don't know. And you've got to invest big in a streaming service, even if your streaming service isn't going to be profitable right now, even if on its face, I think a lot of people are saying they're looking at this deal, and you're going to get, there's 1.1 million W Network subscribers in the US that they're basically going to inherit. Some of them are almost, some of them are going to be Comcast subscribers.
Sure.
But, and that's going to result in basically even less than 1.1 million subscribers. And you're going to charge them the same price, and you're going to charge them $4.99 in some cases for people who are willing to look at the ads. So you're going to get less revenue, I guess, even than WWE was getting. But
and we don't necessarily know how much in ad money necessarily that they'll get off of that too, because they will make up some of that difference as a result of the ads that will play on the content, but it surely couldn't be the amount in which they're sacrificing, right?
Yeah, it's got to be way less on ad money. It's probably a small fraction, I would think. But yeah, it looks like NBC Universal is going to gain way less revenue than W is getting for itself. But when you're Comcast, when you're NBC Universal, and your business is built on cable subscriptions that are declining, you've got to throw all this money apparently at a streaming service, whether or not it's going to be profitable right now. It's a business that you have to grow for the future to make your business profitable and survive in the future. So that's what's happened here. And it's resulted in WWE being the beneficiary of a deal that's going to pay them more generously than their consumers were able to pay them $9.99 a month for. And now for the fan who's for the subscriber of WWE Network, you're getting probably all the same stuff you're getting before, and whatever else is on Peacock. You're basically going to become a Peacock Premium subscriber. So now you can watch The Office.
Oh, yeah, that legitimately a top WWE star, when I reached out to them, and I was like, hey, what are your thoughts? And they're like, we'll be on the same thing as The Office, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And, it's all over. I don't want to say it's all over the map. They're looking at it as positive, and it's mainly optimistic. Even those that were a little bit pessimistic even said, well, this is probably good from a broad perspective because there will be a few people that accidentally find them. When I was poking around about this, I heard people in WWE, they were like, yeah, we thought a deal was coming together like last year, like around like when the switch from Barrios and Wilson happened. They were like, when that happened, we thought something was going to be announced in the following weeks, and they sort of internally blamed COVID. They were like, well, how can you negotiate in a time like this? And it is understandable that how can you negotiate in a time like this? We didn't know if people staying home was going to mean massive viewership increases or what could be held. Now we saw that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, well, in February, so Barris and Wilson were fired January 30th, and then I think the following Thursday there was an earnings call. So Vince was out there by himself and with his interim CFO, Frank Riddick, and he basically said, so that was early February, and he just said that, we're working on a deal, and we might even have it done before the end of Q1, which would have been March 31st, and that never happened. So he was confident enough to say publicly that he almost had a deal done. But as you said, then COVID happened in the middle of March, and that seems to have upset the timing of everything.
And you mentioned kind of putting the genie back in the bottle for pay-per-view. We are seeing AEW, and a lot of people, they'll point at AEW's TV numbers, and they'll be like, yeah, well, TNA back in the day was doing this many million. Well, you look at the pay-per-view numbers, and at least based on what's reported, they blow away what TNA was doing for pay-per-views at a premium price at TNA's height. We see UFC, and I mean, you know the drill now. No matter if it's 50-year-old Rampage Jackson against anybody, Dana White's gonna go on ESPN and say these numbers are trending like Khabib and Conor. Like, he'll always say that, it without fail. But it seems like they're doing decent pay-per-view numbers, but their business is much different because ESPN is paying a premium for all that, and he's basically selling those pay-per-views for ESPN. There are so many different business models here. Do you think that WWE could follow any particular one of them, like selling the pay-per-view standalone, putting a paywall behind a paywall, which was tragic for UFC this past weekend?
I think no. I think it will reassure everybody to hear. I believe, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that every pay-per-view is going to be just part of your Peacock Premium package. And there's not going to be a standalone, not even WrestleMania standalone for any additional upcharge. I think, if you were just playing a short-term game, you could make tens of millions of dollars. I don't know what the math is off the top of my head, but you can make tens of millions of dollars by putting WrestleMania on a standalone $60 upcharge. You'd make a lot of money that way. But I think they see things as this is a long-term investment, and maybe it's just better, in fact, to have a simple offering. I think that was one of the strengths of the W Network strategy, is that there weren't, all these different options, at least for US consumers. It was one price the entire time. It was $9.99. And that was simple for everybody to understand. I think that's kind of an underestimated value in how simple your offering is. How easy is it for me to understand how much I have to pay and what I'm getting in return? So, yeah, I do think, though, they broke something that was perfectly functional and probably more profitable for them, at least in light of all the costs that were related to the upstart costs of the W Network. I still think the best way to monetize these peak monthly events that we continue to call pay-per-view events, because we've always called them pay-per-view events, even though, at least in WWE's case, they have not been primarily consumed on pay-per-view in 7 years. Yeah. But I think that the best way to monetize these is still through pay-per-view. Now, I know UFC is a way different business.
Sure.
They continue to have great success. But you look at AEW, and they're doing only 4, granted.
And that was actually a chat that we just got. Somebody said they have too many pay-per-views. People can't afford $60 1 or 2 times a month.
Yeah. I think what we've learned through the history of this wrestling pay-per-view business, though, is that um, if you think about like the in your house pay-per-views were $15, and as opposed to the regular pay-per-views at the time being $30, the idea was that maybe we'll get more consumption and more revenue out of our pay-per-view buyers by lowering the price. And I think the lesson that we learned from that is that it didn't really matter that they raised the price from 15 to 20. And if anything, buys went up. Later on, they changed the standard pay-per-view price from 30 to 35. I think actually before that, they just said, screw it, we'll just make all of them $30.
Yeah.
And now this coincides with the rise of the Attitude Era and things getting really popular. But even after the Attitude Era, the pay-per-view price continued to raise, and it didn't really seem to affect pay-per-view buys in any obvious way. Because I think the kinds of people who are buying the pay-per-views are the really hardcore base of fans, and the pay-per-view price just proves to be really a business term that I've learned by watching The Wire. Price inelasticity means that no matter what you change the price to, you have a pretty similar number of people who are buying the product. Yeah. I think that's kind of what pay-per-view is. And I would be right there with everybody complaining about having to pay more for a pay-per-view. I never bought a pay-per-view, I think, like kind of on my own. I always did it with friends or something. Sure. Where we split it, So I don't think I would be paying $60 for a pay-per-view, but it doesn't appear in the big numbers that I look at to have any real strong effect on the sales and on the money that you make in the end. So I think the WWE Network strategy that they would get all of these extra sales, all this extra revenue, greatly in excess of what they were getting. We've learned, I think, that there wasn't really as big of an opportunity there as George Barrios and Michelle Wilson thought when the network was coming out. Yeah. And for a few years after, they were projecting 3 to 4 million subscribers. That never happened.
Yeah,
got about halfway there at best. And you think
nowhere, nowhere near projections. And I mean, the rise of piracy and streaming at that time, it's like, who will even bother to pirate it now? They can get it for $10, and maybe you'll make up that difference in eyeballs. And they love to promote the watch hours. They love to say, well, we've got this many watch hours, this many minutes.
Yeah,
because
it determined their bonuses at one point.
Did it really?
It was something that was structured into how they were paying the executives. Was something that was disclosed in the proxy statement one year, which I think is tied to why you saw some of those pay-per-views get so long, and why after Barrios and Wilson left, they've been a lot shorter lately, right?
Much more digestible.
Yeah, I think the idea was that, and I don't think it was just cynically like we want to pay ourselves more money so we make these pay-per-views insufferably long, but that the more time you spend using this service, the less likely you are to cancel it. So I think that's what that was about. And now they after Barrios and Wilson left, they were clearly not into that strategy as much. So that's why the pay-per-views I think have been shorter.
Do you see Comcast or any other cable company sort of adjusting even monthly payments to adjust for this? Comcast, I'm sure we'll have to factor this in a little bit because they offer Peacock as a part of their service. And again, that will cannibalize some of those users.
So are you talking about how is this part of somebody's cable subscription fee?
Sure. I mean, if Peacock is provided as a part of Comcast, could Comcast look at that and be like, well, we're going to increase like $1 or $2, maybe make that back?
I would think that's what they're trying to do. Is the reason why people who have Comcast cable have free access to this or have access to it as part of your cable fee that you pay is they want to get you watching this thing, get you using this thing, get you accustomed to it. And then over time, as what happens on cable becomes less and less relevant, that maybe eventually the bulk of what you're paying for is Peacock Premium.
Reminder, guys, check out more of this great coverage at WrestleNomics.com, something that we rely on in our line of work very heavily. I was a little bit surprised yesterday because I'm not a big stocks guy. I bought some stuff dirt floor, like low, and made some money this year, but I'm not like a stocks guy. Were you surprised the stock was virtually unaffected? I mean, it's pretty well plateaued from where it was in the morning or where it was Friday compared to now. It's not, there's not a significant change.
It is up 6% today. I've only looked at it like one other time today.
Yeah, but since Friday, I don't think it's up that much since before the announcement, because the announcement hit that morning, and I think Friday,
I was surprised yesterday that it didn't jump, and in fact it went down by a couple percent.
Yeah.
I remember thinking before the market opened yesterday morning, well, the stock is probably going to jump here, but it didn't. But it is up today. I think I don't know. Who knows what goes into these things, but I did notice today that what really drives the stock price is kind of just the opinions of these stock analysts, who are the people that you hear on the earnings call who get to participate in the Q&A. And I did see a few analyses come out probably since the market closed yesterday that raise the price target. So it's just sort of what the analyst thinks the real value of the stock is, I guess. And
it's up significantly this past month, like a pretty big increase over the last month, from like around $48 to upwards of 57.41, I think is what it is right now.
It's been climbing consistently since the last earnings call, which I believe was Halloween or October 30th, where we see it down to $36.36, and it's been climbing pretty consistently throughout, ever since then. And now up to $57. My number just changed on my screen.
Yeah. I mean, gone are the days of $100 or $8, but I mean, still, that's pretty healthy. Some people have made some good money on this. Jimmy Van had submitted a question. He says, do you think that this is WWE's internal admittance that the network has peaked, since for 5 years now they had almost guaranteed like $50 million per quarter, even though that included all countries that weren't the U.S., and obviously U.S. is their best geographical demographic for that.
Yeah, I think in 2019, the network really, as far as the subscriber growth, really needs to be looked at in terms of year over year. You compare this quarter to the same quarter of the prior year, because WrestleMania always causes things to peak. And in 2019, we had 4 or 5 consecutive quarters where that year over year comparison was down from the prior year. So I think at that point, I think everybody recognized that, this is at its saturation point at our current level of popularity. And that's where you started to hear Barrios talk about how he wanted to do a premium tier. He wanted to do 3 tiers. He wanted to do an ad tier, which happened. Yeah. And he wanted to do keep the standard tier and do a premium tier that was probably at a higher price point and gave you all kinds of Amazon Prime for WWE is what I kind of conceived it would be. But I think that at that point, I think everybody realized that it's, in terms of the number of subscribers, it's peaked, and way short of the 3 to 4 million that they kind of absurdly in hindsight projected. And, I think it was just in January of last year, it was Vince saying, we're not going to do this the way you're saying we're going to do it. We're just going to sell it. And I think that was greatly at odds with the strategy of Barrios and Wilson. And, they survived for a long time for executives of that company that usually don't last for something like 11 years that they lasted there, starting about the same time and leaving together. And now they're doing their own investment firm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I thought it was pretty evident early on that we were going to eventually see some changes to WWE Network because of how hard they beat you over the head with $9.99 for the first few months. And then for years, you never heard a price point mentioned unless that price point was free. If that price point was free, then it would be mentioned. Do you think that the free aspect of it, do you think that's going to be dead and gone, considering the nature of this new deal? Or will it be a point of attraction where they say, oh, check this out, and by the way, there's a bunch of cool stuff on Peacock?
I imagine so. I think there's still going to be an international W network for everybody. That is exactly what it is now for you if you don't live in the U.S.
Also, sorry to interrupt, Peacock does have a free option as well, so.
Right. Which I understand is very limited. I have to, do some research and sit down with the Peacock app and go through it. But I think there'll still be a free tier, I guess, for those international subscribers who use the network through, in Canada, they use Rogers. They have some sort of, I don't live in Canada, so I can't really tell you, but I understand it's through their cable system.
Well, Rogers owns everything in Canada from what I've learned. So Rogers and Bell, it's one of the two, and they own everything.
Yeah, and in India, Sony handles the network for them there, and I think OSN was even doing something for them in the Middle East, North Africa. But yeah, you can think of the Peacock acquisition in terms of those deals. Now somebody is going to operate it for them. So there'll be a free tier, I guess, for the people who are using the network in the way that we were using it in the US. I think that, like you said, there'll be a very limited free tier where maybe you'll be able to get access to some WWE stuff. And I think, yeah, there'll be a premium tier for everybody else. So you're just going to be, I didn't totally realize this until yesterday afternoon. It's not as if there's a W Network add-on to the Peacock system. You're just a Peacock premium subscriber. And part of being a Peacock premium subscriber is you get the W Network essentially.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's quite literally anybody that has the WWE Network right now, if you pay the same price, you're getting Peacock. Or you can opt to watch ads, and then you're just paying half the price for WWE Network. For fans, it is a home run win. Like, I don't see how anybody could look at it negatively. Now, of course, there are people that look at things and they say, well, what motivation does WWE have now? You would think that these companies would breathe down WWE's neck and say, we'd really like for you to create some compelling content so more people will subscribe to our service. But the track record in which we have seen on Monday nights with that $1 billion deal does not indicate that whatsoever. And they're the ones with this program. It's Peacock and Universal and all that. And on Raw alone, since 2018, we have seen You Are the Authority. We have seen the Superstar Shakeup. We have seen Raw go dark for the last hour. Raw Underground. Retribution as a like, oh, well, this'll fix the ratings type of thing. We saw that. We saw the brand to brand invitation. We saw the wild card. Like, there are legitimately like 10 schemes that instead of just compelling content. However, on Fridays, what we're seeing right now is compelling content. Do you think they'll take a cue from Fridays? Do you think it will be adjusted at all? Is that even in the mindset?
I think I don't have a lot of faith that W Content in general is going to get better while Vince McMahon is the head of creative. I think what we're kind of getting at here is, are there any incentives, maybe in the terms of the deal, and hopefully we'll get some insight into this question next week, Thursday, when there's the next earnings call. Are there any incentives that Peacock is giving WWE to put on strong pay-per-views? Like, do they get a small percentage of the subscriber numbers or something like that? Otherwise, I think for the last 7 years, there's been a W Network, and people have talked about how, well, now it is a more stable revenue source because it is a recurring fee that you pay every month. But it's not like it was when it was just straight pay-per-view, and you had to deliberate every month whether you're going to spend $60 on this product. So now it really is guaranteed. I think before I think you still have to deliver a strong product because people can cancel, and they may use it less over time and then become apathetic. And then eventually they'll realize, oh, I haven't watched this thing in like 3 months. I'm going to get rid of it. Yeah. But now, I don't know. WWE pay-per-views could have very, very low viewership. And what's the deterrent for WWE unless they are being incentivized somehow? If I were Peacock, I would certainly want to build some sort of structure into the terms of the deal to incentivize WWE to continue to do a good job. Well, to do a good job promoting the pay-per-view.
Especially when you see the return that TNT is getting on their wrestling product as compared to other shows. Are you familiar with the Voros twins?
I am.
Okay,
I know
so
who they are.
TikTok viral stars, and when I interviewed them, I was like, they gonna work me? Are they gonna do the gimmick the whole time? And Luther hit me up and he said that's just how they are. He's like, don't be off put by them. That's how they are. And I was very surprised that they gave me insight, honest to God insight on their content creation. And they say, you ever heard of quality over quantity? And I was like, yeah, of course. And they go, not us. They said, we are quantity over quality, and sometimes that's the way that content works. And if it hits, it's worth it for us. I feel like that's a lot of what WWE is doing right now. They're like Raw, SmackDown, NXT, NXT UK, Superstar Spectacle, Main Event, 205 Live. If something hits, that's good. But we've got all these hours, and those hours are important, especially when you're a streaming service touting, we have this many hours of content.
Yeah, and they want to do NXTs all over the world. In 2018, Triple H came out on the stage at the Business Partner Summit, which is the big event of WrestleMania weekend to people like me. and he stood in front of this giant map of the world that had NXT logos all over it. And they just did the India Superstar Spectacle, and maybe India is the next place that they do an NXT brand, just as they've done in the UK, and maybe a performance center to go along with that. I think there was some rumor about maybe buying out a Japanese company before COVID came, and I think they want to put another brand eventually in somewhere in South America too. So I think there's that's part of global localization,
Sure,
as they say, and they want to put all these different brands around the world to target the populations around the world. So I don't know if they're going to continue to create more content, and does the Peacock deal now that it's guaranteed money dissuade any of that? I don't know. I mean, it's not as if NBC Universal is going to own them, so they have to continue to. It's kind of in their interest, I guess, to continue to do, for example, a 3-hour Raw, even though maybe that dilutes the viewership, even though maybe that's not the best thing long term for the popularity of the brand. But it creates 3 hours of content rather than 2, which allows USA Network to be even more highly ranked than it would be otherwise. And it allows WWE to charge NBC Universal a little bit more, somewhere around a third more than they would otherwise for TV rights. So. No, I don't know that we're going to get less content anytime soon, but I don't know. Hopefully you don't have to watch everything to keep up with it.
Last question as we wrap up, and a reminder, guys, WrestleNomics.com. Obviously, WWE is more familiar with Peacock and NBC Universal and all that good stuff. They had talks with ESPN, as reported by Dave Meltzer, but it didn't work out. Do you think a lot of this stuff is maybe more the devil type of thing? Even though, let's be real, NBC Universal has been very good to them of late, especially considering they lost that SmackDown property as well. Do you think that went into the decision at all? I'm sure we'll find out more on the earnings call, but I'm very curious about that.
I think their corporate answer would be that anytime you can deepen a business partnership with somebody and create these synergies, you want to do that. I think more like the real reason is there's some truth to that. You want to improve that partnership because you're gonna have to start renegotiating a TV deal with them in next year, 2022, probably finish a deal 2023, and who knows what's going to happen with NXT here. NXT's deal is probably up in the fall.
And USA's got NHL on the hook pretty soon.
Sounds like they're going to inherit a lot of sports content from NBC Sports Network shutting down.
And Universal has felt out WWE about moving NXT in the past just to see how they feel about it. I've specifically heard of those conversations, and what I heard was WWE wasn't opposed to it, but I don't know what that means. I mean, if it was a hypothetical, why wouldn't you say that you're not opposed to it type of thing?
Yeah. Well, NXT has always been on Wednesday night, and it's the others who came to their night, okay?
If there's anything that we get out of this, did you ever watch Conan O'Brien when he was on NBC?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
do you remember when NBC Universal, I think, acquired USA, and he had the Walker Texas Ranger handle?
That's right.
If we can get our truth with a Walker,
a rope.
Yes, if we can get our truth with a Walker Texas Ranger gimmick, only on pay-per-view or on Raw, obviously. I mean, I think this is a win for fans everywhere.
Yes, you're integrating your intellectual property that way. I mean, this is exactly what Stephanie has talked about all these years. Is brands want to be integrated with your content. That's why I think the next step is to just create the Cricket Wireless Universal Championship, and you've got the sponsored NHL leagues now, or NHL divisions now. I think it's maybe only a matter of time.
Well, Brandon, I thank you so much for joining us. Of course, WrestleNomics.com. Tell the people where they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, I have a podcast that comes out every weekend, WrestleNomics Radio, that you can find just by searching for WrestleNomics in your podcast app. I have a website, WrestleNomics.com, that I put a lot of my written work on. There's a lot of resources and business statistics that you can find there. I have a Patreon, patreon.com/WrestleNomics. It's got a report and analysis about all of this Peacock business that's going on lately. And you can follow WrestleNomics on Twitter @WrestleNomics. You can follow me on Twitter @Brandon Thurston.
Guys, thank you all so much. Brandon,
And
thank
it's
you
great
so
to be
much.
reunited with Sean Ross Sapp.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on. Guys, make sure you leave a thumbs up, subscribe, check out all of Brandon's stuff, and we'll have more on this on the Listen You Boy this week. Until next